Well, hello there, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is another episode of Vote for Vermont, another episode in our Meet the Candidate series. So we've been talking with candidates for a wide variety of offices from the top to the bottom of the state of Vermont, because we believe that you as Vermonters deserve to know exactly who it is that's looking to represent you. This has been kind of a strange year for campaigning, so this is our way of providing a free platform for candidates of all parties to be able to reach you and communicate with you, the voters. Today, I'm joined by Chloe Collins. Hi, Chloe.
Hi, thanks for having me, Alex.
She's a candidate for Senate in Franklin County. How are you today?
Good. How's your day going so far?
Yeah, it's excellent. Glad to have you on. So let's start off. Let's start at the beginning. Introduce yourself a little bit to our audience.
So, hi, my name is Chloe Collins. I live in Swanton, Vermont with my husband and my twin 2-year-olds. So they keep me pretty busy. I came to Vermont a little over a decade ago to go to Vermont Law School. And I got my law degree and a master's there. And since then, I've worked in a variety of fields. But the last 5 years, I worked in restorative justice as a case manager, helping people with criminal charges make amends to those who were impacted by their crime and come up with a plan going forward to avoid reoffending. So I'm passionate about criminal justice reform. I also am the vice president of a nonprofit called the Alberg Clubhouse, and we are seeking to build a child care enrichment and education center in Alberg. So far, we've raised close to $800,000 in funds to build an affordable child care center in Alberg. So I'm also excited about creating more affordable child care opportunities.
Wow, very cool. You have your hands full, and you're trying to do this as well. That's a lot on your plate. So let's start with run us through what some of your key priorities are that you would like to pursue in this role.
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, I'm really interested in addressing criminal justice reform. I'm also passionate about environmental conservation. I do have my master's in environmental law and policy. I want to make healthcare affordable and accessible to all Vermonters. My husband lost his job in March and I lost mine in July, both due to COVID. So we lost our health insurance. And I think this pandemic has really shown Americans how important it is to have affordable health insurance that is not tied to employment, so that during a pandemic, people aren't left without coverage. I'm also really passionate about creating affordable childcare opportunities in Vermont. When my husband and I found out we were having twins, we started doing research and found there wasn't even one center with 2 infant openings within 30 miles of where we lived. So we really had to we came up with an alternative and hired a live-in nanny, but it threw me into my passion on being the vice president for the Alberg Clubhouse, because I realized how essential having affordable childcare is. I also have had so many clients who are offered great work opportunities, but they're usually second or third shift. And because there isn't a lot of childcare opportunities or any, I think there's one center now that does 24 hours, but that offer an alternative shift system. A lot of people have to turn down really necessary jobs for their family. So I believe that if we work on making sure that Vermonters have accessible, affordable access to childcare and to healthcare, that they'll be able to stay in Vermont if they're young, and they'll be able to invest in our local economy. I also think that we need to work more on weatherizing our homes. Almost a quarter of the housing stock in Vermont is more than 80 years old. So I think if we create new affordable housing and improve existing homes, we can also create good paying jobs to improve energy efficiency and reduce housing expenses for hardworking Vermonters.
Excellent. Well, thank you. You know what you're aiming for. That's great. So give us give us a rundown of why it is that you want to do this, why you're running, and then also what are the things that you would like to accomplish in your first year?
Absolutely. So I am by the furthest thing from a career politician. I don't even really like politics, to be honest. So I'm running because I felt that I had to. So my story is a little different. My husband and I bought our first home in Swanton 5 years ago. We love living here. Swanton has had these great public mural boards that basically anyone could paint at any time. And in the years I've lived in Vermont, most paintings stayed up 6 months, maybe a year. And a teenage girl came and painted a Black Lives Matter mural, and within 24 hours, it had been whitewashed. And I found that really upsetting. So I went out and I repainted it. And I became the target of a lot of harassment. I received death threats. I get racial slurs shouted at me when I'm grocery shopping. I actually had to file a really lengthy police report because of the level of harassment I received for my artwork. And I kept trying to make the artwork more clear that it was about bringing Vermont together. I added flowers, I added peace symbols, then I stopped doing the black fist because it seemed like there was some misunderstanding of what it represented. And I started just doing a black and white hand holding. But it seemed that no matter what I painted, white supremacists would come and either deface it with patriot front symbols or covered in white. And the whole experience was really eye opening to me. I think my white privilege has hid me from how hard it can be to live in Vermont for minorities. And it made me realize, wow, if I, as a white woman, am this scared, I can only imagine how our minorities feel. And the town actually voted to take down the artboards and apologized to some of the people who were harassing me. I've yet to receive an apology. And that the entire way that that was handled with made me think, maybe I speak through art and I try to make everyone feel welcome through art, but maybe it's not enough. Maybe I needed to do more. So the Progressive Party actually reached out to me. They had been following the story of the Swanton art boards, and they said that they felt like I had what it took to run. It was definitely last minute, and it was June already, so a lot of campaigning was already underway. But I agreed to run. So there isn't a Democrat running against the two Republican incumbents. So me and my friend Luke are both running as progressives against the incumbent Republicans. And Luke uses the term political hostage. I don't know if I would go that far, but I would say that we are both running not because we're career politicians, but because we really care and we really want to create a Vermont that feels safe and welcoming for everybody and not just for the majority.
Excellent. That's a really crazy story. We're actually Campaign for Vermont and Vote for Vermont right now is recording a whole series on racism in Vermont. And I should talk to you after this interview a little bit, because that might be a really interesting platform for you to share that story on as well.
I would be happy to, yeah.
And, let's move a little bit more into some of the technical stuff. We know that with COVID-19 has really just wreaked havoc on economies, and we're not projected to really see the true impact of this pandemic until next fiscal year, 2022. What are some of your plans? What would you do to address that? I mean, in particular, we have to take into account all of these financial liabilities that the state of Vermont has through our unfunded pension liabilities, what we have to pay for water quality as according to the feds. We have education liabilities. So how does that whole financial picture work, especially in light of this pandemic?
So I have some pretty creative ideas for reallocating funds that are currently going to our criminal justice system. So in Vermont, the number of men in prison has gone up 300%, and the number of women in prison has gone up 1,000%. But our crime is actually at the lowest that it's been since the 1960s. So I don't believe that we need to have so many people in jail. There's a lot of people, 150 right now, who are held in prison in Vermont just because DOC has not approved their housing for when they come out. There's a lot of low risk offenders who just haven't reached their minimum sentence but are elderly. A lot of states offer something called compassionate release at that point. Then we have a huge percentage of people who are in jail for technical violations or lack of bail or nonviolent offenses. So I believe that we need to rehaul our criminal justice system. We need to be incarcerating people less. And because I spent the last 5 years working with low-level offenders, I really see the importance of actually teaching people the skills they need to get better instead of throwing them in jail. A lot of people in Vermont commit crime, I saw firsthand, because they struggle with substance abuse. 54% are mentally ill. We're not making anybody better by incarcerating them for $55,000 to $85,000 a person. In fact, what happens is people get further traumatized. They come out with a criminal record and are unable to find employment, and they're virtually left with no decision but to reoffend. I believe that we've created the perfect system for incarcerating more people as crime decreases. And I think it's a broken system. And I would like to get in there and start shifting around funds so that we're actually helping people get better. And we're also giving them the tools they need not to reoffend. I believe that, if you look at St. Albans City, we have one of the highest police budgets in the state of Vermont. It's over $3 million. I don't think that we need to have police responding to a majority of these calls. I think social workers are better equipped.
Excellent. Let's move on to the Global Warming Solutions Act and your thought on what some of the environmental policy that Vermont's trying to do.
Sorry, I have some notes I wanted to.
Oh, no problem at all. And maybe as a follow-up to that is this idea of, when people talk about Global Warming Solution Act and some of these environmental policies, there's always the included wording of, oh, well, it's going to cost too much, or we can't afford it. Regular Vermonters can't afford it.
I would say we can't afford not to. If we want our children and our grandchildren to be able to enjoy Lake Champlain, the time to act is now, not some, ambiguous date in the future. Even this past summer, there were multiple dates I wanted to take my 2-year-old twins swimming in Lake Champlain, and we couldn't because there were various algae warnings. Lake Champlain is one of the most beautiful things Vermont has to offer. It's also one of our largest tourist attractions. I believe we have to act now. I was really disappointed that Phil Scott vetoed the Global Warming Solutions Act. As I said, I got my master's in environmental law and policy from VLS. I also worked for a year as an environmental analyst for the state of Vermont. So I've seen firsthand what the repercussions are when we don't act to save the environment. I think it's really necessary. I know that part of the reason he vetoed the bill is because it holds the administration accountable. And I think that's exactly what we need to do to create real environmental change.
And so speaking of the governor, he's been on record saying that the economy isn't really coming back as quickly as he'd hoped from this pandemic. And, obviously it's really hard to predict that kind of thing, but are there some things that you'd like to see happening to help move that recovery along?
Yeah, I really do believe we need to be investing in green infrastructure. We've lost 500 renewable jobs while Scott's been in office. I think that if we start investing in things I mentioned before, such as weatherizing some of our older homes, that we will see such long-term gains in profit by creating more affordable housing, by ensuring more daycare options.
We lost your video, Chloe.
Sorry, somebody.
There you go.
Incoming call.
So we were just talking about some of the things that you'd like to see happen to continue to spur and accelerate the economic recovery.
Yeah, so by investing in more affordable childcare, more affordable housing, I think that we'll see a lot of young Vermonters who leave stay. And I think that the more young Vermonters, when I look at all the people who I graduated law school with, I can name only maybe 2 who stayed in Vermont. And there's a reason for that. We need to create affordable housing, good job opportunities. And in order to do that, I really believe the solution is investing in infrastructure and restorative justice and social programs.
A strong area of interest that Campaign for Vermont has been working on for several years now is ethics policy, because currently we don't have any in statute code of ethics for our politicians, for our state agents and our state representatives. Do you support having ethics legislation and expanding some of this, expanding Vermont's current ethics legislation?
100%. Vermont currently ranks 43rd in government integrity laws. I don't really think that's acceptable, but I would actually do more. I think the ethics legislation needs to expand to municipal offices. Just living in my town, I've seen instances where people made a complaint about somebody who worked for the town, and then their own father sat on the board to make the decision about whether or not he violated the rule, whatever was being at issue at that time. I don't think that's really acceptable when we have, spouses and parents making the decision about whether someone will have a penalty for breaking the rule. I think that we do need more ethics codes. Also in Vermont, state contractors are allowed to donate freely to political campaigns. Corporations and their owners can give money to politicians, including the governor and the attorney general, even when they're doing business with the state. I think we need to set an example in our legislature about ethics. If you look within DOC and some of the reports that have come out, they're absolutely atrocious of drug and sexual abuse of people who are under the supervision of the state by state DOC employees. And I most recently read that nothing's coming of it and no charges are being pressed. I think that's unacceptable. I think it's the legislature's job to set a standard and a tone of ethics. And I want to see that across the board. I want to see DOC implement it. I want to see municipal offices implement it. We have a duty to the people of Vermont to be fair and to be impartial.
And one of the things that we try to reinforce when we talk to people about this is the fact that ethics policy is really meant to be it's meant to be educational more than anything. There's this perception that it's designed to be a gotcha policy and something to go out and sniff out the baddies. And, it's not what it's meant to be. It's really meant to be an educational tool, but also to give Vermonters the sense of confidence that there is something there that is holding their politicians accountable and holding the decision makers accountable.
Absolutely. I agree.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but this right now obviously is a big time of civic unrest out there. There's just, I think people are seeing more and more what the real picture is, even here in Vermont, that likes to paint itself as not ever having any problems. What needs to happen to bring people back together again?
Absolutely. So I think Vermont has a lot to be proud of. Montpelier was the first high school in the state, in the country, to raise the BLM flag. I think we've seen a lot of progress. The protests in Burlington did lead to a police officer stepping down. I believe, Scott's administration appointed Susanna Davis, who's excellent. I actually worked with her directly to create a diversity and equity committee in Swanton, where I live. So I think that she's a super valuable resource for people who are struggling in their town and want suggestions. I also think we need to look at successful police departments and what they're doing. So in Milwaukee, after a lot of protests, the office actually created within the police department a new office where it uses public health strategies rather than police enforcement to reduce shootings and serious crime. And they developed something called the Blueprint for Peace. And it's really great if you read through it. Basically, they look for community-driven solutions to violence. So one of the things they do is when the officers first start their job, they go door to door, they knock on the door and they say, what can we do to help your family feel safe? That's what we need. We're lucky in Swanton to have an excellent chief of police. I've actually become really good friends with him through my work, through reporting all the harassment I've gotten. I think he would embrace something like that. And I think that's really what Vermont needs. We need police who are for the people. I speak to my BIPOC friends in Vermont. They are terrified of the police. They don't call them for help. They avoid them at all costs. You look at our disparities in arrests and sentencing, it's one of the worst in the country. Other states arrest Black people at an average of 3 to 4 times white people. In Vermont, it's 8 to 9 times. That needs to change. And in order for the racial disparities that are going on, we have to actually address the systemic racism that exists. And it exists everywhere. It's in our education system. I think it's our challenge as white people to constantly be questioning our own biases and asking BIPOC how we can help make their voices heard and how we can help make them feel more safe.
And so I guess we have another question here in the similar, a similar vein is that what does the term defunding police mean to you?
So I think a lot of people hear that and they get really scared and they picture an empty police station and they think we want to, people who support that movement want to just get rid of all the police. But that's not actually what it looks like in a lot of states that have embraced this. Instead, what it looks like is taking some of the funding that goes to having police respond to calls that they're not equipped to handle. So let me give an example. I have a brother who's a paranoid schizophrenic. He has spent close to half his adult life in prison. And the reason why is because he doesn't follow what police tell him to do. because he's schizophrenic. That's the only reason. And I think that's wrong. 54% of our prison population has a documented history of mental illness. Police are not getting extensive training in social work or mental illness. So when they get called, more than once I've called for a welfare check on my brother that's ended up with him being incarcerated. That's not a solution. That isn't helping anybody. I think when we talk about defund the police, what we mean is we keep the police. We're not getting rid of the police. We're simply restructuring the way that they respond. Maybe they have a social worker who actually works within the department, and every single call, there's a social officer and a policeman, and they answer together and they decide who's better equipped to handle that call. Some states have handled it that way. Some states have handled it like Milwaukee, I mentioned before, with just making sure the police have more positive outreach in the community and making sure that people actually feel comfortable and safe around them. I know there was an issue here where a friend of mine, he tried to attend a meeting to kind of give BIPOC voice back to the community, and all the officers showed up in full uniform, and it didn't make him feel safe. So I think we need to listen to the marginalized people in our community about what we need to do to make them feel safe, and we need to make it happen. I hear so many white people in Vermont say there's no racism here. It's not for you to say. Ask your friends who are BIPOC how they feel.
Excellent. So we're just about to the end of the questions here. So let's go to the good old fashioned why you? Why should people vote for you, and why do you think that you're a good candidate for this position?
Sure, thanks. So like I mentioned, I have my law degree and my master's degree from Vermont Law School. I came to Vermont to go to graduate school, and I stayed here because I love it, and I want to continue to work to make it a safe and welcome environment for everybody. I've dedicated 8 years since graduating law school to social service work, and I've seen firsthand the problems that plague Vermonters and that our current approaches are not working. I will be a voice for marginalized folks in our communities and not just the majority. I'll continue to make sure that social services have the resources they need to help people not reoffend. And I believe that I have the experience, the tools, and the education to make Vermont safer and more welcoming for everyone.
Excellent. I think we were having some of those good old fashioned Vermont bandwidth issues there towards the end, but the audio was great, so the message will get across. We do have a couple more minutes. Are there any last minute things you'd like to cover?
I would just say, I love living in Vermont. I'm a homeowner. I'm a gun owner. I love everything our state has to offer. But I believe that everyone deserves to feel safe and welcome here. And it's my goal to make sure that that happens so that I can raise my kids in a state that has the values of inclusivity.
Well, I did notice that it seems like you're adapting to Vermont well, because even being here for only 10 years, you pronounce Swanton right by eliminating. You didn't say the T, which is always key. Swanton. So, well, very good, Chloe. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to this episode of Vote for Vermont, and keep listening beyond the sound bites.